Okay.
Okay, so I lied. It's not starting in a minute and 4 seconds. It's starting right now because we got a late start, all because of me. And I don't want to waste Beth's time. So we're going to get right into it. Hey, everybody, I'm DP Knudten, and she is Beth Fisher, or she can speak for herself because I would hate to mansplain.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Especially since you know me so well. I know how well that would go over. Hi, guys. I'm
Yeah.
Beth.
Yeah. I don't sense that would go too well. So,
Uh,
welcome to Faithful, Faithless, a good faith discussion about, I guess, anything spiritual, religious, whatever your flavor. I think we're willing to talk about all of it. And I'll just state my position for, any viewers who are watching for the very first time. What you need to know about me is that I was raised in a Lutheran household. My father was an ordained Lutheran minister and a PhD in sociology, which is kind of an interesting combo to be a doctor of philosophy or a doctor of divinity and a doctor of philosophy and sociology. My mom was a PhD in sociology too. So believe me, I got it from both sides. I mean, the social science side and the religious side and all that stuff. And turns out what happens when you've got parents who are highly accredited in religion or education primarily, but also religion. You come out the other side of being a pastor's kid, and you're like, I certainly love the spiritual part of it, but the religious part, I'm not so into it. That's me in a nutshell. Beth, what's your nutshell?
My nutshell is I come from generations of Irish and Italian Catholics. So I grew up in the church in Catholicism. Every Sunday we went to Mass. I went to CCD. I went through confirmation. And I heard the story of an angry God because I am an overachiever. And I thought, how do I win this game? Was it like 11 Hail Marys, right? I just didn't understand who God was. I didn't understand much about it. And after what I like to refer a checkered resume, my almost 50 years now on the planet, I've come to land at a very different place and picture of God. My family, all of us, have actually stepped away from the Catholic Church. So I'm a big believer that religion ruins relationship. I'm not a fan of religion. I am a fan of people. And this is interesting because today, I have to tell you, is Maundy Thursday. I went back to school too and got accredited, if you will. I have a couple master's degrees in theology because as a Catholic, I didn't read the book. I only had a missalette. I had the cheat sheet. And so I love where we are because today, the word Maundy is Latin. It's command, as Jesus's command to love one another as I have loved you. And so that's kind of where I land, right? If we love each other well, I'm not a big patient. I don't have a lot of patience for all the legalism and all the
Yeah.
rules.
Yeah, well, that's certainly true of me as well. The kind of rules part, I love the spirit of the rules. Love thy neighbor as thyself, and all the 10 Commandments, some of which are a little bit archaic, but I get this stuff about coveting your neighbor's donkey, and can kind of, I guess, apply that to their new car. Covet not your neighbor's new car, things like that. But the judgmental part of religion was very, very difficult for me and still is very, very difficult for me because the Jesus that I grew up learning about in Sunday school, I don't know if I didn't get the full story, but the story I got was here was this guy who was nothing but pure love, who embraced the most downtrodden, most marginalized people on the face of the earth. And he was very empathetic. If I were to come up with a single word that describes my understanding of who Jesus Christ was, it would be empathy on two legs. And somehow that ran headlong into what I think anyone raised in the Lutheran Church would understand is the kind of rule following German part of Lutheranism. It's more important to follow the rules than follow the spirit of the rules.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's, even as a little kid, that did not compute with me, you know. So did I throw the baby out with the bathwater? I don't think so, because all the things I learned from my childlike understanding of empathetic Jesus still applies. And I'm definitely imperfect. Make no mistake about that. But I don't feel the need to have my passport stamped every Sunday, or we're coming into Easter, you know, being that one time a year churchgoer on Easter, that doesn't appeal to me at all, you know. And
You're not even
anyway,
a crease. You're not even a creaster. You're not even a 2 times a year. Christmas
no,
and
not a
Easter.
creaster,
Oh,
not an
got it.
Easter. You know, the fact is, yeah, when our kids were growing up, if they were involved with some program or something like that, we would definitely go. But
Yeah.
I, I, yeah,
This is
that's
the
where I
part.
net out.
This is the part when I listen to you, and granted, we've only spoken 2 or 3 times, but obviously instantly connected. And I love where you, even in this thing that we're doing here, you say we have 2 distinctly different views, and this is for those of you who are Enneagram people out there watching. I am a 3 and an 8, like a very like it's just I have an 8 chaser. I am all about social justice, and I will. Eights are often viewed as arguers. I prefer it as discussion. So I'm going to discuss with you the fact that I respectfully disagree. I don't think we have 2 distinctly different views at all. I think we have, especially when I hear you speak about this, it's what I have. I think we just, as every human on the planet goes through, I think we've evolved at different times because we're on different time schedules, if you will, like which is none of the above. And we're landing in the same place from a variety of experiential differences, if you will. So like, your story is different than my story, is different than the next person's story. But after 25 years in corporate, this about me is I left that world. I am serving in a homeless shelter, the least of these. And what's so incredibly crazy to me is the judgments that people have. And every single day, to me, what matters is being proximate to the least of these. I don't see people who are hungry and homeless and go, hey, so are you following like all the rules? Are you a Lutheran? Did you get number 7 right? It's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to say, you think that you see me, because I've had people say this. What does somebody like you care about somebody like us? I'm like, I don't know who this you and us and other is, because Jesus didn't see people like that. Everybody's made in God's image. And finally, I just have this inclusivity view that growing up in the Catholic Church was not permissible. Let me tell you, like, unless you were a good Italian girl, a good Italian boy, like, yeah, well, sorry about your eternal luck. Right?
Yeah,
I don't have that view anymore.
yeah. Well, and the thing that always trips me up are the structural issues related to most organized religions. It's the how much you tithe. It's how often you do this, that, or the other thing. It's not. I don't know. Even as a kid, I could just look around the church and spot the people who were there upright, ramrod straight backs,
Yeah,
and
front row people.
yeah, they were front row people
Uh-huh. Yeah.
who would then go kick their dog when they get
Yeah,
home.
right.
And
Hypocrisy.
the again, my childlike understanding of the teachings of Jesus were, it's not about the talk, it's about the walk. It's the way you treat people, it's the way you support people, and not everyone is going to be 100% altruistic. In fact, I'm a cynic enough, and if you're an Enneagram person, I'm a 5, which means I'm all about thinking stuff through. But interestingly, I'm also a heavy 8, and I think the 8 is something I've grown into over my life. But I'm kind of, my natural place is an Enneagram 5, the more logician, the walking Vulcan of everything, and so it's this weird combination of I must intellectually understand it, and yet intuitively empathize with it. As a kid, oh my God, I was one of those kids who would watch the nightly news, and I remember this. And at the time, I'm growing up in the let's see, it would be the late 60s in Valparaiso, Indiana.
Wait, time out. That's where you were? That's where you grew up? I don't know this about you. I lived in Chesterton forever.
Oh
Well,
my
not
gosh.
forever. No, okay, we'll talk about this in a
Well,
second.
there
Keep
you
going.
go. I mean, Valpo. I mean, my dad was teaching
Oh,
at
yeah.
Valparaiso University. And
I had no idea about this.
yeah, no, we grew up in
This is
Coolwood Acres on Route, what is it, Route 30?
49.
Yeah,
49.
yeah.
Yeah.
And just on the west side of Valpo.
So
And
funny.
we would watch the nightly news while we watch. And then this is my family, right? The TV's on, watching the nightly news while we're having dinner. We were that type of family, which is, if we're going to be feeding our bodies, we should be feeding our brains at the same time. So it would not surprise you that my parents were both PhDs. And we would see the reports. It was every year it's the same thing in some regard, but back then it seemed to be really bad that every night you would see bloated children in Africa starving.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine being a human being, a child who's watching this as you're sitting there stuffing your face with whatever you put in there and not having an emotional reaction to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly did. And I think what happened over time is that some of that absolutely got burned out of me. Maybe it's the worst type of exposure therapy, where you've seen it so much, you become inured to it. You build these calluses. And, I guess that allows me to function as an adult, but sometimes function a little too cynically as an adult. I mean, yeah, if you said, David, are you a bit cynical? I'd go, yeah, in the true Greek philosophy definition of the term, a cynic. It's like someone who looks at everything with, and what's your agenda?
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I don't know if I'm...
Do you think... No, you do.
Go
I have a
ahead.
question about that, because people have obviously called me cynical over the course of my journey too. And do you think that cynicism shows up in our lives as a defense mechanism at times? Do you use it to sort of like guard people, or perhaps even, we talked about judgment. Are you judging people from a lens of cynicism, like, right? Because they want something.
Well,
What do they want out of this?
it's interesting you ask that question, because yes, I am cynical. Yes, I consider the fact that people have an internal agenda and an external agenda that they live their lives based on. But the funny thing is, I will still, to this day, give people I meet way too much credit for being completely sincere and honest. It's like if you said the default condition for a human being, describe it, I'd say, well, 90% of people tell the truth, but 90% of the people will shade that truth to their benefit depending on what they need that given day. Yeah. And I'm okay with that, because I don't expect perfection from anybody. But I remember, let me give you an example. I went to school in California to get a master's degree in acting. Did not stick. And I was talking to a guy, and he was talking to me about all these people in Hollywood, and how he was talking to so-and-so and this and that. And I'm like, God, I'm a kid from Wisconsin. This is pretty darn impressive. And then about half an hour after that, I go talk to someone else, and they just look at me and go, he was lying, right? I'm like, no, why would you lie about stuff like that? As a kid, I do the lying on who broke the thing. Oh, I didn't do it. But this person was just lying for lying's sake.
Yeah,
and it's like, huh?
Yeah, that happened to me. I have a lot of altruism as well, and I give people a lot of just leeway, right? And for me, it was sort of, I wrongly assumed that everybody saw the world like I saw it. Huge mistake. And when people would say things to me like, hey, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. You are awesome. I love you. You're great. Let's do this thing. I kind of believe that too. You know, so um, I, like you, truly believe that 90% of the population says the things that they say because they mean it in that moment. They really believe that they're telling the truth. But the question I always ask is, whose truth is it? You know, is it their truth that they have filled in the gaps, their own narratives with? Is it obviously coming from presuppositions and experience and what has been brought into their own journey? But um, do they have critical thinking skills? Like that, those are the questions that I now ask, because I, at 18, 19 years old, you know, when you don't believe and stand for anything, you fall for everything. That's legitimately true. And so I didn't know what I stood for. I stood for whatever, you know, where's the cheapest beer at Ohio State? That's what I stood for. I didn't, but I was very principled and I was a hard worker. So all of the things that I was made with, I truly believe that we are created with spiritual giftings, as you know, and just I think that our steps are planned. I think that we are also, with the gift of free will, do we get off track, right? And so it's, hey, here you go. I'm giving you these things that you are going to be incredibly excellent at, and you're also going to get off of those tracks at some point in time. So I did, and so I didn't have critical thinking skills. My only, I guess, baseline for deciding if I wanted to hang out with somebody and believe what they said was, oh, they seem nice, right? Because I came from a background of people who were not so nice to me, or messaging that I heard inside the Catholic Church, quite honestly, that didn't feel so nice and loving. So I gravitated towards whatever words were spewed my way, which is crazy to me because I knew better instinctively and still kind of fell for it, if you will. But that's part of the learning experience. I don't regret those times. I don't, you know, I don't hold any resentment or hostility towards people because they're learning too. We are all in this thing together. Again, sort of parallel tracks, but at different times on our journeys. And it's like, okay, if you want to keep going in one direction, great. I've got to make the decision whether or not I'm on this track alongside you. And now I very easily put those boundaries up. And if somebody comes at me in any professional capacity, religious, it doesn't matter. In the course of my day, my world, my life, I now know, like, no thanks. And I'm okay with that. Before I used to feel guilty for that. I'm like, no,
Oh yeah.
we have critical discernment skills, and let's use them. Because if not, you end up in a place where you had no intention of going.
Yeah. Well, I hear you, because when you have when you strive to maintain an open heart and an open mind, it's easy for people to take advantage of that. And
Right.
I look at it from the point of view of, you know, it's that old, what's the old, it might be an Aesop's fable about the frog and the scorpion or something.
Oh yeah.
The the scorpion convinces the frog that, hey, I need to get across this lake or this river. Let me go on your back. And the frog is convinced, and okay, I'll help you out. Halfway through, the scorpion stings the frog, and the scorpion dies by drowning. The frog dies because of the scorpion's venom. And before the frog dies, he said, "Why'd you do that?" And the scorpion says, "Because I'm a scorpion."
Yeah.
You knew that.
Right.
Well, the
Whose
thing
fault
is,
it?
yeah, the thing is, when you start out your life, you don't know what a scorpion is if you are a decent, kind human being. But you
Right.
discover that pretty quickly, because, and some people repeat hanging out with scorpions because they don't learn.
That's why I've been thrice married, as we know.
Well, I avoided that by not getting married until I was 32, I want to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Because that didn't mean that I didn't date or anything like that. I did that, and I was a bit of a cad, I will admit. But who isn't in their 20s? But
Well, if you're married.
well, once I got married, that stopped. Why?
Yes.
Because I understood what marriage was and what I
Yeah.
wanted a marriage to be. I don't need to. I wanted to have that deeper relationship, that lifelong relationship, that mutually supportive relationship. And consequently, some of the people who have known me for a long time look at the woman I married and are like, "Why? Huh? That doesn't seem like who I would expect you to be with. And I said, well, that's the thing. Who you would expect me to be with is not the person I'm going to be with for the long haul, the real commitment that I wanted to make. And that's the whole thing. I didn't want to get married. I wanted to commit to somebody at a very foundational level for the rest of my life. And consequently, we've been married now. We've been together 27 years. We've been married 25. Or is this 26? I never remember because it's
you
it's
better
like
remember.
breathing. No,
25's
see,
a big one.
but that's the thing. That's the thing. I don't have to remember because I'm so committed. It's like I don't have to think about it. It's like I don't think about breathing air.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
I
not
don't think
commitment.
about air. I just breathe it. I don't want to take my wife for granted, and I certainly try not to, and I know I could be better about that.
I'm just saying 25 equals silver, so, you know.
Yeah, well, believe me. And she's solid gold, so there. Boom.
All right. Sold.
Yeah, but anyway, the whole recognizing scorpions in your life thing. Some people overlearn the lesson, meaning that, and it happens in relationships a lot, where people get burned once and they carry that burn through the rest of their lives on every relationship and actually make the burn happen again and again and again. I'm not saying that they become the perpetrator, but be careful what you wish for, because it just might happen. And in the case of some people, and I hope this is not hitting home with you, but just that idea that that if you expect the worst, don't be surprised when you get it. However, like you, I do learn and go, oh, I gave you that amount of rope. Well, you just hung yourself and you're dead to me. Moving on. And it becomes a very Vulcan kind of non-emotional. You are the way you are, and that's okay. Not the way I want to be myself, which is why I'm taking the exit.
That's right.
And that to me is the essence of wisdom. It's knowing what is fixable and what is not, and not wasting any time on what is not fixable with individuals.
Yeah. And, a lot of people ask me about that. Like, how do I know? And I have a daughter, as you know, who's 25, and she's happily single on her own. She's, in her master's program, just like a little force of nature, a little Miss Independent. But she is trying to figure things out, as we all do at that point in life. And I just say to her, and everybody who asks me, there is no rule book other than to be true to yourself. And what I mean by that is not like your truth at the expense of other people's well-being, or at the expense of you being compassionate and empathetic towards them. What I mean is knowing who you are exactly. And so if you know who you are, then don't deviate from that. Don't settle, don't detour, just like be the thing. And say to people, to me, clarity is kindness. And so it was clear to me when I was in a church, as an example. I'm like, I don't belong here. People clearly are looking at me like I don't belong here. I don't have to feel like I am a terrible Christian or a loser or a failure. If I walk out of this church, I can still hold my head high and go, yeah, not the place for me. Relationally, career-wise, it doesn't matter where you are in life. It matters that you see yourself with enough value and mattering and worth to make those decisions to say, yeah, I'm worth rolling right now because this is not me. I'm not going to change for whatever environment I'm in, because it might make me feel good and less guilty and more accepted in this moment. But long term, it's a losing proposition.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I mean, we're definitely here talking about our own personal spirituality, our own journeys within the sphere of religion and spirituality and stuff like that. And yet everything you just talked about is what I talk about all day flipping long as part of my marketing practice, what I do, and if you're viewing this and don't know this, I have a podcast called the Nonfiction Brand Podcast, which is all about exactly what you just said. Know who you are so you can be it in building a personal or small business brand. And I don't want to talk about that. I just want to say it applies across your entire life. When you know who you are and you are who you are, you align yourself with the people who share those similar things and witness the fact. How do I know you? I was on your podcast, and then you came on my podcast, and within that 2-hour conversation window in toto, I found a new friend who I really value and appreciate. Now, that doesn't mean that down the road the scales might fall from my eyes, and I find out that Beth is a lizard person who's got an agenda to take over the world or stuff like that. I don't think that's going to happen. Why? Because we've gotten to know each other in what I think of as a really meaningful way. And frankly, that's part of who I am, which is I don't have a lot of time for small talk, but deeper talk. You want to talk about Saul's conversion to Paul on the road to Damascus? Let's talk about that, because I have, again, a child's or young person's understanding of some of the biblical stories, but frankly, I'll be honest, I think a lot of those stories are best understood at that level rather than some higher intellectual, archaeologically proven way, because these are universal truth stories, not individual narratives of something. The idea that someone who was a very venal human being like Saul could have a redemptive event in their life that totally converts them and allows them to get rid of the bad, absorb, highlight the good, and live forward not getting rid of the core of who he is as an individual, but kind of like shedding the clothes that don't fit and putting on the ones that do and moving forward. I mean, that type of conversation is interesting to me and instructive to me and something to be chewed on like a really fine piece of beef. It's just like there's a lot here, and it's going to take a while to figure that out.
Exactly. It's 66 books and a lot of history, right? And a lot of analogies and metaphors that, depending on the church where you are, depending on your upbringing and understanding, can really lead you astray, as it did me, because I'm a very literal thinker. And so here I am picturing some dude on some road with actual scales on his eyes, instead of critically thinking and going, is this maybe metaphorical? Like, maybe is it just a metaphor for what you just described? And that's where I land, quite honestly, much of the time today. Well, when I am in the presence of people who are hurting and struggling and questioning, the last thing I want to do is throw scripture at them. It's the dumbest thing. It's the most just, I hate it. It's a waste of time. I also think it's degrading. I think it's dismissive, so all the adjectives. I just think it's wrong. Now, do I think that there's a baseline structure to be told, i.e., you're loved, you matter? Yeah, of course. And to me, that's what scripture is. That's who Jesus is. That's why we're here. So I find you don't have a lot of patience, DP, for platitudes and small talk. I don't have a lot of patience when people are like, well, let's open to the book of John and read this. And it's not to sound trite, like it's not to sound like I am being disrespectful of God's word. I'm not. What I'm saying is, who are you doing this for? And that's what we often say in the homeless shelter, right? It's like, okay, is this toxic charity? Like, are we trying to give $2.17 to feed somebody so we feel better and we feel like a good Christian and we're checking a box? Or are we doing it because we see them and their humanity and their struggle and their suffering? And we're not judging them. We're like, oh my goodness, if this is my child, my brother, my spouse, my partner, I'd want them to have a decent meal. Like, it's not hard. If you think about it from that perspective, it's really not rocket science. I mean, I love people with PhDs. I gravitate towards intellect and existential questions and deeper conversations. But at the end of the day, it's really not hard to be a decent human. You just got to be one.
Yeah. Well, and again, it goes back to what I was saying about this kind of childlike understanding. Mm-hmm. That's the essence of it. I mean, I don't want to point fingers or pick on people or sex, religions, whatever. But so many people are there for the analysis of the document, and they miss the story.
Yeah.
And there's a difference. And I'm fascinated by biblical literalists because it's like, how do you live your life as a biblical literalist? Because it contradicts itself on every other page. I mean, and I'm not here to litigate that, other than to say, how can you literally follow the Bible or the teachings of the Bible and not understand the true story of it, which is what, in my humble opinion, is what you just said. It's about, you are loved. You are capable of loving even the most downtrodden and marginalized people around us. These people who need our help are not slackers. And by the way, 10% of them might be. But 90% of them who are challenged because of the way life happens to them. Not everybody has the privileges of a great education, because my parents, you go back, take a look, how many ministers are in my family? Going back 6, 7 generations, maybe? How many higher education professors or college graduates are? There are more college grads than there are anything else. So for me, the idea of going to and through college was not a, are you going? It's, of course you're going. The question is, are you getting advanced degrees? Are you going to get a master's and a PhD? Are you going into academia? These are the questions I was privileged to be asked in my family. Other families did not have that. And I'm reminded, I was reading an article, maybe it was in a sociology text or something like that, but it was basing, I think it was a study based on the outcomes of people in their lives, when it came to being imprisoned or dealing with the law, based on the number of books and periodicals, magazines they had access to as children. Now, in my family, our magazine rack, there was a magazine holder next to one big chair. That was my dad's chair. There was another one that my mom was typically in. And there were magazines. We didn't just get Newsweek. We got Time and Newsweek and National Geographic and Life and including journals for sociology, which I did not read. Thank you very much. But I did read everything else, or at least skim it. And I absorbed so much that I had immediate access to because I had immediate access to it. Mm-hmm. Now, am I better, smarter, faster, stronger than other people? No. I am more privileged. I have access to these things that enabled me to absorb a whole lot more than other people do. So that idea that how much you make throughout your entire life can be tied to the number of books you were surrounded with as a child amazes me, but I understand the truth of that. And I believe that, so how does that relate to what we're talking about today? I'm not exactly sure.
I do. It's Matthew 25. And what that means is that you said the word privilege, and it's resources. It's access to resources. And often, I know I'm going to this whole homeless situations, right? It's the world in which I live, but the marginalized, the people whom Jesus was serving. And really what we say is the perception is that those homeless people, boy, if they would just go get a job, they wouldn't be homeless. Pull yourself up by the proverbial bootstraps. But here's the thing. How do you pull yourself up by the bootstraps if you don't have boots or if the strap's broken? Like, you can't do it, right? And so it's as simple as saying the least of these. To whom much is given, much is expected. And at some point, we have to humble ourselves to say, man, we've been given a lot. We just have. And for those of us that you just beautifully described, like you were surrounded by knowledgeable people, wise people, educated people, resources, books, schooling, all of it. It's not wrong. It's what you had. And nor is it wrong for people that grow up and they're not surrounded by those things. But then what is the work to be done? What is ours to do? That's the question that I ask all the time. And instead, you get to a point, I think, in your life where you're like, I don't need another pair of shoes. I don't need another book. I don't need a thing. There's nothing I need. And yet I look around and I'm proximate to so many people that need so much. And when I say need so much, I mean basic human rights, right? Just things that are not granted to them, they don't have access to. And instead of blaming and saying, well, if you just go get a job, you can maybe go get, your own Big Mac down the street. No, it's about more than that. It's about seeing somebody as deserving of the things that I had. And I didn't do anything to deserve it. I didn't do anything to deserve it. I am grateful for it. I'm grateful that I had two parents. I am grateful that I had a dad who worked hard. I'm grateful that I had the Encyclopedia Britannicas 1 through 26 that somebody peddled in the back of a trunk one day. Like, I'm excited about those things, and I was when I was little, and I didn't take them for granted. I utilized those resources to get me to where I am today. And where I am today is saying, wow, I should probably do something with all that I've been given. To whom much is given, much is expected. And that's it for me. So if somebody says you should, I stop listening. I do. I think that because it's not my place any more than to receive those words any more than it is to provide those words to somebody who's experiencing homelessness or a crisis or whatever the situation is. They're doing life. And for me to roll up and say, you should just do this. Who am I to say that? No. My job, what is mine to do, and what I believe truly ours to do, is to see that person as somebody who is an image bearer of God, somebody who made in the image of God, to say, I'm not here to tell you. I'm just here to be with you. I'm here to come alongside and support you in whatever way you might need support. That's it. It's hard for us to receive love as humans. It really is. It's our pride. It's our egos. It's, I can dole out love all day long, but boy, you come at me and give me a compliment, I'm still pretty terrible at it. It's
Yeah.
hard to receive that because we don't always feel worthy. So we can just all say, yes, we're deserving of that. Each and every one of us. I'm on an equitable journey, I think, for humanity. If somebody says, what are you trying to do? Equity. I just want people to all feel the same amount of love from the same creator who made us. That's it.
Well, we are in agreement completely on that. We do things differently. You've dedicated your professional life now to this, working with Mel Trotter Ministries.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, and and I applaud you for that. I don't necessarily take on as big a load when it comes to that stuff, but the way that I interpret or apply what I feel we share when it comes to what you just said is, my kids go to public schools. I happily pay way too much tax for them to go to a great school system. We provide them with the enrichment opportunities wherever we can. We try to help our community in ways that we are able. And we are on the definite credit side of the ledger when it comes to, okay, I could get really cheesed off by the fact that I just signed a check to the Internal Revenue Service that I didn't want to sign, but no, that's part of what you do when you care about other people, and you understand that things like, for me, public schools are so very important. And I understand that some people want to have their child receive religious instruction in schools, but and you do whatever you need to do, as long as, from my point of view, it is supporting our shared world. And that's what it is. We share this world, and it is better because of our sharing and helping each other out. And that's where I come down on things, and where I have issues are, well, let me just say that sharing to me is a synonym for inclusion, for including people. It's not about setting up walls or tests to keep people out. It's about opening the door and inviting people in, and making sure they feel that. And one of the challenges I've had, or one of the reasons that perhaps I'm more faithless than faithful, I guess that's not really a good, I'm more religionless, not faithless, because I do have faith, maybe not in the religious definition, but I do have faith in humanity and people. And I believe that we can make things better together. And And this is coming from someone who's kind of an introvert who would be on a desert island if he could be, because people, not necessarily my number one favorite flavor of ice cream.
All right, that's how we're different. I love it. No, I love everything you said, and that's exactly why we connected. Right? You're right. It's about inclusivity. There isn't
Well,
us that I don't view it like that anymore. I used to, because that's what I was indoctrinated with. I used to feel like, well, you're not Catholic, boy, sorry.
I tell you, one of the most interesting things I've been doing lately is, believe it or not, there is a religious side of TikTok that is absolutely fascinating. And I I follow a number of different people, pro, con, up, down, religious, historical, anthropological, archaeological, whatever. And I'm not, I'm just taking it all in. But I find the interesting thing, especially there's a whole deconstruction TikTok for people who are deconstructing their religious experience because they desperately want it, but not like they had it. Like you've mentioned the fact that your Roman Catholic background had you, well, put it in your own words. You were confused. You were what?
I was bought in. I succumbed to the this is what you should believe. Therefore, figure out how to believe it because there's no other way. So I was sort of, I'm I'm a consummate questioner. That's just how I learn. I think curiosity is hugely helpful to all of us. And I was apparently too inquisitive for a lot of people. It was off-putting to a lot of people. Who does she think she is? That was the question I got so many times. And so whether it was religion or in school or I questioned teachers, it was not to be disrespectful. It's because it didn't compute. And you're exactly right. So I think when we grow up in those really rigid structures without any roadmap to where the structure from where it was erected, like that's not helpful to anybody. It's just not helpful. It doesn't provide critical thinking skills. It provides a cult, a dictatorship. That's it. And I quietly became I don't know if it was obstinate, stubborn, dismissive. What it did, I think, is turned my natural zeal, my zest for life. It sort of just dimmed my flame until I, rose again from the ashes. And I was like, you know what? No, that's no way to be. It's not who I am. Not who I am. So now I understand that people were putting me in my place from their point of view of they didn't know. They didn't know how to answer. Therefore, it was my fault. And everybody else's fault who asked the same questions. Not just me. I'm sure people out there can relate. But I now look at those folks not with resentment or it's their fault. I look at them from a place of almost just empathy, as we talked about, and that, well, nobody's shown them either. So they're responding in the only way they know how to respond, but I don't have to take it. I don't have to internalize it. I don't have to wonder if I'm wrong. I don't have to wonder if I have to go in the confessional and say an extra couple Hail Marys because I was shut down. I just have to keep on pressing on and asking those questions because guess what? God's able to take those questions. And I also am a firm believer that, me well enough to know my language isn't always ladylike, So I also believe that words are words. And if we have intention of lifting somebody up, then it doesn't matter how you do it. I do it with humor sometimes with people that I'm very close to and have known me for 45 years. They don't expect me to come at them with flowery language. They'll be like, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? Why are you being so sweet? Right? They don't expect that. And so I think inclusivity, including and accepting people for who they are, how they speak, how they were created is the best gift that we can give one another. Instead of saying, I'm going to try and change you so you can believe more like me, not for your benefit, but for mine. So I'm more comfortable with my beliefs that I don't even understand. That's, I think, what gets people off track.
Yeah, no, that's, I feel the same way, very much so. And the power of example cannot be overstated. And what I mean by that is there are the people who tell and talk, and the people who just do and walk. And I'm more impressed by the walkers than the talkers. And I guess so much of why I'm a-religious is because there was so much talk with walk. Some, and some people were better about it than others, and whatever. But the rules, the gates, the obstacles, the traps that were placed in the way of anybody's, I hate to use the word journey because it's used way too much for too many different things, but it is a bit of a journey for people throughout their life. If you look at it that way, from birth to death, it's nothing but a road or a series of choices. And along that road, there are choices. There are crossroads, there are intersections, etc. And based on who you are as an individual, that determines or that informs your decisions on which fork in the road you're going to take or which intersection, you're going right, you're going left, whatever. Those decisions that are made are informed by who you actually are, unless you haven't done the work to figure out who you actually are. That's what drives me crazy about social media. There's so many followers of individuals who are fronting. You know, put it in biblical terms, there's so many false prophets out there. And
posers.
Oh yeah, posers. Oh yeah. Posers. Namaste. Posers.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not saying anything bad's about namaste. I'm talking about the guys with the man bun or the women who are just happened to be on the beach in Belize as the sun was setting and the wind was blowing and their diaphanous swim wrap was doing this woo 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 thing, and they look fantastic and they look skinnier than a supermodel, or they have the last name Kardashian. You know, these people, it's just, you have no idea who you are as an individual. And you're following the things you think that you need to follow, or you're chasing the things you need to that you think you need to chase. And you don't need to chase them if they aren't right for you, or you don't need to follow them. You don't need to. What you need to do is figure out who you are.
Yep.
And embrace who you are and the things you care about, and live your life in a way that bolsters those things, that are informed by those things, that engender those things, or actually provide an example for others.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I want to be like that person, not because, oh, I like the car they drive or the way they look in a swimsuit, but because they're a really great human being. So the question becomes, what makes them a great human being?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's where I think a lot of people need to do some work, not only on figuring out that about others, but figuring that out about themselves. What makes you a great human being?
Mm-hmm.
Figure that out, and then lean into it hugely.
I have nothing more to report or to add to that statement. That's true. It's so true. You know, and we often talk about kind of staff that we want to hire. And I think this is true in any situation. But Patrick Lencioni is one of my favorite leadership authors. And he talks about characteristics. 3, hungry, humble, and smart. Are you hungry for passion, right? Are you hungry for something greater than yourself? Do you want to make a change? What's your why? All the cliches, right? But what are you hungry for? What change do you hope to affect for the greater good? Are you humble? Do you go about it with a spirit of humility? Are you doing it for the benefit of others? Or are you doing it so that you can, you know, be the top hit on the Google SEO? And are you smart? Are you people smart? Which means, can you read a room? Can you see what people need and do your best to provide what that is from your own lens of authenticity? So hungry, humble, and smart, to me, it just sums it up. And, you know, scripturally, it's Micah 6:8 for me always, because, you know, I am a doer. And I think that people in the cheap seats are always the ones that can rip other people apart the loudest, but what are they doing? So it took a long time for me to just say, they don't, their opinions don't matter. They matter as humans, but what they're saying, it needs to come in one ear and out the other immediately, because they're not in the game. They have no skin in the game. So, act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly. Act justly. Like, what is justice? What is right? Figure that out. Love mercy. Be merciful. Don't be a jerk, right? That should have been my sort of second book about all the dates that I had. Don't be a jerk. Like, why are you a jerk? Jerks are not welcome here. And walk humbly. Walk with the spirit of humility. Because when you walk with swagger, when you walk with I'm better than, eventually, man, something's going to come your way and just remind you in a hurry that no, you're not. No, you're not. It's really about humility. And, the least of these, the last will be first, the first will be last. All the things that you read in scripture, it really matters. And somebody asked me, I was teaching the other day, a class of at a Christian college, and it was their I think it was their chapel, and it was like their business award ceremony, whatever it was. They just said, hey, come up here and talk about your journey. I'm like, okay, I can do that. And it was just so interesting to me that afterwards, some of the things that people would say resonated so deeply with me. And one of the questions, the very last question I answered was, so you've done a lot of things. What do you want to do the next 5 or 10 years? And I honestly, in that moment, said the answer. I said, I don't know. It's not on my list. I started my speech, my discussion with, you guys, when I was younger, I had a list the size of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I was just check, 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 check. And that was what determined my worth. My inner narrative and dialogue was, boy, if I knock this one out of the park, if a 4.0 is a solid GPA, I'm getting a 4.5. Oh, well, what's the fastest somebody can run around this track? I'm going to run 2 seconds, faster. Whatever it was, I always wanted more and more and more, because it's performance-based acceptance. If I do these things really well, somebody's going to notice me and love me and like me, and then God won't be as mad at me for all the stuff that I was doing terribly over here. It was just like this imbalance of a scale. And I just looked at this senior in college and said, I have no 5 or 10 year plan, which if you would have known me 5 years ago, and somebody would have said, this is what you're going to stand up and say in front of a group of people, I would have laughed and said, there's no way I'm saying that. Please don't, offend me right now. Of course I'm going to have a 5 or 10 year plan. I don't. It's Proverbs. It's the steps will be guided. I don't know what they look like, but I have finally the faith and the trust to go, it's going to work itself out. You'd think I'd know that after surviving a bone marrow transplant, 2 divorces, corporate America and a man's world. You'd think I figured out and have that trust. It took me literally almost 50 years to say, I actually have it. People ask me questions and I don't hesitate. I'm like, I don't have a list. I don't have a list. It's freeing. It's the best thing you can get to.
Oh, you are so right. And I think we both have the benefit of being on this rock for a significant period of time, because, again, everyone has that list to start out with. Well, part of the list, we're trained to need lists or to fulfill lists from very early on. Did you graduate high school? Have you applied for college? Are you getting your degree? Are you getting a job? Blah, 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 blah. Are you getting married? Are you having kids? That's a This is a standard list that a lot of people just take their copy of the list and start checking things off without ever asking, wait a minute, is this right for me? For who I truly am, not the person that I think I want to be. And I'll be honest with you, I look back on my 20s, and I'll speak for myself, not for people in their 20s, but for myself in my 20s. Even back then, I wasn't that bad about it, but I think of the 20s as your cosplay years, where you put on different costumes and you go, does this fit? Does this fit? I'm an outdoorsy guy this week, or I'm a rocker this week, or, or I'm going to be an intellectual this week. And then, for the longest time, I was going to be a writer, kind of a pipe smoking writer. One of my favorite authors was
Hemingway guy.
Well, yeah, in my case, it was J.R.R. Tolkien, who I read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and stuff like that in high school. And then this is the way I go, which is once you go down a rabbit hole, you go all the way to the end of it. And I read the autobiography, or it may have been a biography of J.R.R. Tolkien. And that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a writer because I loved words. And so the funny thing is, I now am a writer, a copywriter, an advertising copywriter and stuff like that. I've written 2 books as well, but it's not the same type of writer, because I wanted to be the poser writer. I wanted to be the guy in the houndstooth jacket with the leather patches on the elbow. I wanted to be the kind of smarter, a little bit smarmy, oh yes, that's so droll type of writer, and I realized that that's just an image I have of what a writer is, instead of becoming the writer I am, which is, oh, it's funny, I don't write fiction books. Why is that? Because I thought I'd be a fiction writer. No, I write about what I know. How do I know it? Because I've lived it. And I've come to terms with the fact that what I've lived has given me experience that is valuable to somebody. Not everybody, perhaps, but somebody. And so I speak from the truth that I have actually lived, because, the core thing to me is that it's true. Mm-hmm. That it's honest. And again, I may be looking at myself through rose-colored glasses a little bit, but I think the core of me is that, no, even me, I recognize my warts, because that's part of who I am too, which is, yeah, you think you're pretty good, but you're not, which in the book I wrote, that's actually a superpower, to always think you're a little bit of a hack. That makes you work a little bit harder to not be one. Mm-hmm. And that's okay, as long as you don't think you're such a hack that it stops you from doing. I'm so bad I can't do, I'm not going to do. No. If you think, I'm not the best, I'm going to work harder to make it better, that's actually a superpower, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we're getting close to the end of this because we started late, but we like these things to wrap up around 1 hour in. We're at 57 minutes and 57 seconds. So I think now is a good time to just have us introduce ourselves. So Beth, why don't you start and just let listeners understand who you are, what you do, and how you do it, and where you do it. Because I think that's very, very important. So take it away, Beth.
Yeah. Thank you again. My name is Beth Fisher, and I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I will tell you that I have experience and a passion for folks who are experiencing adversity. So I am a personal and professional development coach. I absolutely consult in the nonprofit space. I have a background in automating business process. So I love people, I love business process, and I especially loved a couple of those things in the human services area. So faith-based missions, as an example, is something that I love to spend time speaking and meeting people and say, like, what kind of CRM are you using? How can we automate? How can we work smarter and not harder so that we can benefit those whom we serve? I also am an author. I wrote a book called Remorseless: Learning to Lose Labels, Expectations, and Assumptions Without Losing Yourself, because as we've talked about, being authentic is huge, right? You can't really go about the course of life without understanding who you are first and foremost. You can't really be of benefit to someone else unless you know the lens from which you're coming, not from what societal expectations have told you, religious expectations, parental, go on with the list, right? So yeah, I'm an author. I'm absolutely a public speaker. So you put me on a stage in front of one audience member or 1,000 or beyond that, I'm happy to talk all day long and really just bring some motivation and inspiration and reminding people that they matter, no matter where they are in the world.
If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, how could they do that?
Best way is bethfisher.com. That also goes to my fisherstrategic.com website. So bethfisher.com, send me a message there, and I'm on all the social platforms as well. But start there on the website, and then I'll take you to where you need to go.
Yeah, well, that's good personal branding when you got a website with your name on it and no one else has that website, and it's all about who you are, what you do, and how you do it. That's really smart. And frankly, that's what I do. I help people discover, craft, and communicate the completely true, completely you personal brands they already are. And I put it in personal brand speak, but it really applies to small businesses. If you have less than 50 employees, your small business is you. So get used to that, embrace it, and make it a core part of your business. You can reach me at dpknudten.com. You can see how Knudten spelled right there on screen. And I too embrace the philosophy that it's good to own your own URL in the .com space on the old internets, because if anyone's going to look up your name, they should type it into Google and find it. So that's it for this week on Faithless with myself, DP Knudten, and the lovely and talented Beth Fisher. This is a periodic conversation we have whenever we can carve out some time in our schedules. And it also goes to the power of social media and podcasting, because I never would have met Beth Fisher, who's in Grand Rapids, Michigan, because I'm in Wisconsin, divided by a great lake called Lake Michigan. I never would have met her. But because we communicated and got each other pretty damn rapidly by being on each other's podcasts, I've now got a relationship with someone who I value very highly. So get out there, share your voice, and be honest about who you are, what you do, and how you do it. And also be honest with your faith when it comes to what matters to you. If you know what matters to you and you live a life like that, I'm going to say your chances of living a fulfilling life go way up. Would you concur, Ms. Fisher?
My answer to that is amen.
All
yes,
right.
I would.
Well, that's it for this week, and we'll probably be back some other time. So if you like this type of conversation, right now you can subscribe on my YouTube feed. We're trying to figure out how we can also get it on Beth's YouTube channel as well, but we'll figure that out, because we're learning this as we go. So thanks for watching, and we'll be back next time.